A prosperous family's dream becomes a nightmare as a devious plot develops, revealing a surprising twist that perplexes even the most seasoned detectives. Don't miss this compelling true crime story's spine-tingling facts. We're going to examine with you another terrible instance today. Intense and gloomy emotions are jealousy and ravenous greed. Their tale developed into one of Australia's most notorious and brutal crimes to date. The investigation's length and intricacy are remarkable, since the gang responsible is certain they can avoid punishment. His plan, which was mercilessly carried out with great care, was almost flawless, but eventually the cops found the necessary breakthrough thanks to a small detail they had missed. Let's go back to the beginning of this story and see how a combination of avarice, jealousy of other people's success, and corrupt passion can drive someone insane, turning them into a hideous creature that, in their rampage, didn't even spare children. The terrible demise of Min Lin and Yun Lai, as well as love's ambition, are depicted in the Lin family saga. In the late 1980s, while attending an Australian university for their undergraduate education, Lin's love story started. The two Chinese nationals had each left their own country to pursue further education. Min, who was 2 years senior to Lily, stayed in the nation for a professional internship after earning his bachelor's degree, while Lily participated in an exchange program. They subsequently recalled that it was love at first sight, as their paths met in a university corridor. They were united by their desire to begin a new life in Australia, despite feeling like outsiders in a foreign country due to their shared roots and dreams. After graduation, the pair got married and made their home in Sydney's serene and lovely North Epping area. A huge, close-knit family that was devoted to and intimately linked to one another was born out of their love. June Brenda Lin, who went by her middle name Brenda most of the time, was their first child, born in August 1994. In 1997, their son Henry was born, and in 2000, their youngest child, Terry, was born. Men concentrated on commercial matters, and Yun devoted her time to raising their children and taking care of the home. The siblings had a strong bond that made them practically inseparable. Moving the family to Australia from China, the Lin family's wealth increased as they made their home in Australia. They started extending invitations to Chinese relatives to come visit or perhaps settle down there. The first people to relocate to North Epping in the early 2000s were Min's parents and family, who lived nearby and assisted with the kids. On the weekends, Min's father worked at their newsstand as well. Min's parents relocated to a Sydney neighborhood a few years later as well, with Yun and Min purchasing a modest home for them. Irene, Yun's sister, moved in with the Lins to help with the kids and domestic duties. The Lin family firm was making close to $1 million a year by this point in time. It was more than just a store or publishing house for them. It had developed into a community hub where locals congregated over coffee to read and talk about news. In search of better prospects in the vibrant metropolis of Sydney, Kathy Lin Nai, Min Lin's younger sister, and her husband Lang Bin Robert C. relocated to Australia towards the end of 2007. They had previously traveled to Australia to see family and had lived briefly in Melbourne before moving back to China. This time, they were committed to making Australia their permanent home. Kathy secured employment, but Burr stayed in his self-discovery phase, uncertain about his next move. Strong affinity and kinship bonded the Lin and Z families together. They were in regular contact, saw each other practically every day, and got together for family dinners frequently. On Friday, July 17, 2009, in the evening, they had their final gathering at the parents' house of Kathy and Min. They had no idea that this would be their last get-together, the scene of a horrific massacre at the Lin family home. Regular visitors were taken aback when the Lin family's shop unexpectedly closed on July 18. The store, which has been open 7 days a week for years, did not indicate that it would open and had no warning signs on the doors. Customers and other store owners were alarmed by this strange incident. After trying to get in touch with Min multiple times without luck, one of them called his sister Kathy to find out what was going on. Given that her brother had never closed the store for a day without making prior arrangements, Kathy was taken aback as well as astonished, frequently having their dad or father-in-law fill in for him. She made unsuccessful attempts to reach Min and his wife Yun. Her attempts to reach their home phone were likewise unsuccessful. Concerned, Kathy and her spouse Robert decided to stop by Min's place to make sure everything was okay. The front door was unlocked when they arrived at approximately 9:00 a.m., and they could see the family car in the driveway, but there was no one home. The house was deathly quiet, and none of the family members' calls went unanswered. The house showed no indications of having been broken into. Reaching for her brother once more, Kathy made her way to the second story. Opening Min and Yun Lin's bedroom door, she shouted in terror and despair as she staggered backward to take in the horrific scene in front of her. Blood covered the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and drapes in the room. Thankfully, Brenda, the 15-year-old daughter, was not at home during the awful night, since she had been gone on a school trip the day before. There was no sign of Min Lin, the head of the household, or his body, creating a remote possibility that he is still alive and may have been hurt, kidnapped, or managed to flee. Kathy dialed 911 right away, but she was in such a state of shock that she had trouble explaining what had happened. She begged for medics to come right now and attempt to save as many people as they could as she cried and yelled into the phone. Nevertheless, at the scene of the atrocity, the first responders could only affirm that every victim had died. Robert left to get the Lin parents, who lived about 10 kilometers away from the crime scene, the morning after, a terrifying discovery that came after Kathy's desperate call to emergency services. Within minutes, the paramedics and cops showed up, and what they'd found was labeled as one of the scariest crime scenes they had ever seen right away. Unfortunately, for any member of the Lin family, it was too late. All of them had died from repeated strikes to the head, caused by a hefty blunt weapon that looked like a hammer. But the deadly weapon was missing from the scene, causing detectives to deduce that the offender had removed it. Eventually, Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, wrapped in a blanket drenched in blood. He had been similarly battered to death like his family. He seemed to be the first casualty, then his wife and her sister, and then the two boys. Upon preliminary examination of the crime site, no noteworthy leads or evidence were found. The lethal weapon was missing, and money and valuables were unharmed, suggesting that the main goal was to destroy the Lin family rather than commit thievery. Multiple assets were first suspected since it didn't seem possible for one individual to defeat that many people at once. At first, neighbors and family friends all agreed that the land had no known adversaries. Thus, there were no leads or hypotheses regarding the identity of the murderer. Although Brenda's grandparents also offered assistance, Kathy and Robert insisted on taking care of her in the main. Robert even issued a legal warning to the elderly relatives who said they were too old to raise a teenager in case they filed for custody. Brenda continued to live with her aunt and uncle when the dispute was eventually resolved peacefully. In addition, Robert started diligently going through the family's savings accounts, real estate, and other holdings, research, and theories. Strictly recording every detail, professionals examined the crime scene over and over again. Nothing substantial came up despite their efforts. According to their deduction, the murderer most likely entered the house silently and operated alone, which suggests that either a door was left unlocked or the murderer had a key. With their distinctively elaborate tread pattern, the killer wore a size 9.5 shoes. Nowhere in or near the house was the deadly weapon, thought to be a hammer, found. Because the murderer wore gloves, only traces of the 5 victims' DNA and no fingerprints from outside sources were discovered. The fact that blood marks were discovered on the doorknobs of every bedroom where the offenders were found was an odd but important element, suggesting they were touched by the killer's blood-stained gloves. But there were no bloodstains on Brenda's room's doorknob, indicating that the murderer was aware that she wasn't there. Considering the history of a burglary gang in the region, such possibilities weren't completely discarded. Men had seen an armored car heist a week before the fatal episodes, and the Lin business had been attacked months before the catastrophe. Even if the offenders wore masks so that men were unable to recognize them. Unexpectedly, Kathy addressed her husband directly and added something in Cantonese before mentioning his name. The investigator was intrigued by this detail and decided to translate her words. As it turned out, Kathy was begging her husband to keep her company when she was alone in the house. This was noteworthy since Robert had made the independent decision to go get Lin's parents, abandoning Kathy before the cops got to the grisly crime scene. Robert's actions appeared extremely questionable. Kathy could have been the killer's target because 5 people had just been brutally removed from the house, and Kathy might still be there. However, Robert exuded composure and walked out as though he knew his wife would not suffer any harm. New evidence and the primary suspect. The police eventually found a major suspect, the only one after several fruitless months. It was found that, not long before the catastrophe, Robert had received a key from men to his brother-in-law's home. Interestingly, Kathy was ignorant that her brother had given her husband a key, and Robert never brought up this subject during interrogations. Brenda unintentionally gave the investigators access to this important detail. Robert's claim to be a successful ENT specialist turned out to be a front, according to more research. Despite having a medical degree, he was never employed in the field on a steady basis. Rumors circulated that he left China for Australia to escape punishment for supposed bribery accusations. Robert pretended to have inherited the Lin family's wealth when Brenda's guardianship paperwork was completed. His first action was to evict Yun's parents from the home Min had purchased for them. Even though the house was legally purchased under the deceased name, Min and Kathy's parents continued to live there. Kathy noted that her spouse had a favorite shoe brand. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of sneakers from a limited edition line that he liked. One pair was worn out and thrown away, but the other was kept in pristine condition in its box at home. Notably, Robert shared the same shoe size as the murderers, 9.5. The crucial piece of evidence was when Robert was shown painstakingly dismantling the shoebox using one of the cupboard cameras. A fresh pair of size 9.5 sneakers was discovered in the suspect's residence after this footage led to the issuance of a search warrant. These sneakers' tread patterns matched the prints discovered at the crime scene. In addition, a tiny blood-like trace was found smeared throughout his garage. According to forensic examination, the blood stain was in fact that of the 5 victims of the Lin family, and its DNA linked it to the crime site. The police finally had the hard evidence they needed to act when this evidence resulted in Robert's arrest. Arrest trial and startling information. Evidence resulted in Robert Z's arrest in May 2011, 2 years after the fatal events. The eerie aftereffects of this horrible murder persist even after we close the books on the Lin family's story. This real crime documentary has shown a depravity that even seasoned detectives find unmatched, delving into the depths of greed, envy, and a diabolical intent. Subscribe now to ensure you don't miss any upcoming episodes if you want more suspenseful stories and unique insights into the brains of criminals.